How many of y'all were here last week or watched last week online? So I know how much to actually... So most of you. We are in a series called To the Hills. We approached it from Psalm 121 that I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? That the psalmist struggles at this point of some time in his life or maybe in the journey to Jerusalem during a pilgrimage, and looks to the hills, and we know that the hills are not where our help comes from. And he immediately says, my help comes from the maker of heaven and earth, the Lord God Almighty. And then the whole back half of the psalm, literally, the first two verses cover what we talked about, and then a whole bunch is just affirmation, a continual prayer, so that, not that we know God doesn't let our foot stumble, but we pray, God, don't let my foot stumble. Help me in this journey. And we talked through a lot of the things of fear, and we went through, did anybody look up the Chapman studies on fear? Okay, cool. It's a good thing that I did all the research for us. I still have one of them up here left over from last week, but the university in California, Chapman University, they went through and studied fear and all the things that cause angst in our lives, and they ranked them. And we talked about how zombies ranked higher than ghosts, I think. Is that what it was? Than what? Clowns. That's right. No, clowns. Ghosts was actually higher than all of them. Yeah, zombies were scarier than clowns. And I think that's probably something to do with whether you grew up watching The Walking Dead or you grew up watching or reading Stephen King books. Whether that thing is scary to you or not. And some of it is they have questions and they ask them to a swath of people and they kind of explain how that works. This morning what we're going to do, and I'll kind of give you the rundown. We're going to talk about, this week will be spying, identity theft, tracking, that people are scared that somebody's watching them. This is the Big Brother sort of thing. That somebody is listening to your phone conversations, or does anybody have your telephone with them? Just take it out and wave at the camera. Next time you're in the bathroom, do that too. It's kind of goofy, it's kind of weird, but so this week is spying and identity theft, and I kind of smushed a few of them together because a lot of them kind of overlapped. Next week we will talk about terrorism. We'll talk about pollution and different factors of pollution, and we will talk about money and not being able to pay your bills. We'll talk about the scare of illness to a loved one or a loved one dying, because most of us are far more scared of something else happening to somebody we love than to ourselves. And then the final one, as we get towards the middle of October, we will talk about government and whether there is corruption and whether to be scared and some of those factors. So that'll get you primed and ready for November amidst all of the ads that will no likely bombard us as we approach. But this morning what I want to do is raise your hand if you've ever had that moment where you felt spied on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7... Anybody was it before or after Edward Snowden came out and totally whistle blew on everybody and now he lives in Siberia? Was it before? How long ago? Anybody long time ago or recent? Oh, now they're whining, huh? No, she's playing. Here, I want to, rather than asking you all, I was going to ask you to share a story. Here's what I want to do. Billy, will you put up that text message that I have? This is between me and Dustin Spurlick, and you won't be able to read it very well because it's going to be all pixelated up there. But this was May 6th last year, and he sends me a picture of his bathroom. He had just moved back to Lenox from Little Rock, and I have redone a few bathrooms and stuff over my years, and he's asking me, hey, what do I need to make sure that I put the toilet in the right way? And I don't want to get things in and then get stuck and have to take things out. And we go through this conversation. You can't read it all, but he says at one point, I'm like, I see the little pipe sticking out of the wall, and I'm like, you need to make sure that you put a 1/4-inch ball valve thing to turn on and off on there, and not the spinny one a whole bunch of times, but just a little turn. And he goes, oh, I'm using shark bite. And my question is shark bite ? I don't know what shark bite is. Anybody know what shark bite is? Yeah, because you've been doing this sooner than I have. Like, I learned how to do all this stuff a long time ago when I couldn't figure it out. And then I paid a plumber to come over, and I told him, the only way that you can do this is if you teach me how to do it so I never have to call you again. And he's like, that's the weirdest thing anybody's ever said to me, but sure, let's do that. It's my money, my time, let's figure it out. Okay, so Bill, go to the next one. This was on the 10th. So from the 6th to the 10th, this is an Instagram feed. Shark Bite Plumbing Products. That's an advertisement right there. So it went from 4 days earlier, Dusty texts me that he uses Shark Bite Plumbing Products, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. I never looked. This came. Yeah, have you had that? It makes you wonder. It just makes you wonder. Bill, put that next one up there. This, anybody know who this is? The Zuck. Marky Mark. So this is right from his Facebook feed. And then we're going to zoom in a little bit on the next one. So this is a little closer. I want you to look at his computer a little bit. It's over to the left-hand side of the screen. Oh, so what may be hard for you to see is if you zoom, I put the little zoom bubble thing when I edited it. That's tape over the microphone and a little scotch tape over the camera. This is in 2016. Mark Zuckerberg puts tape over top of all of his stuff. Okay, so that's for the secret stuff. Since the world changed and COVID came into the world and something happened in the Wuhan with bats and animals and all the who knows what, we now have a website that will actually grade our state on how well we do social distancing. Unicast grades all the states in the United States. The United States gets an F as far as it goes between socially distant. And then even South Dakota, we get a D+. But specifically within Lincoln and Minnehaha, we get an F. Now what you should ask is, how do they know that? This right here tells them. So what it does is every time this connects to the cell phone tower, it measures the signal, and it knows the distance. And then it measures the cluster of people around that signal and tracks the data of the distance to say, we're not tracking you, we're just noticing clusters of cell phones together. Immediately, Apple and Google said, hey, let's work together. How about we try and find a way that we can track so that if you've come in contact with somebody that has COVID and is tested positive. And then just September 1st, just a few days ago, we get this next one. Update, it's ready to go. All you have to do is, this one's specifically for iOS, but it's also Google. You can see it in the bottom right hand, and they have all you do is you just say, update my phone, and all it'll do is anytime this phone comes in contact with another phone via Bluetooth, presumably, which, isn't always on. I mean, you can turn it off, right? Can you take the battery out of this? No. Anytime it comes in contact with another person, it tracks it down, and it writes down 2243721765543 at this location. And so every single person in here is in proximity. So then, let's say I go in at night and say, yeah, I had a COVID test and I tested positive. It will send you all a notification. Sounds good, doesn't it? They're watching you all the time. And these are the ones that before, that was the 2016 when Mark Zuckerberg was putting the tape over. This is just this week that says, will you now give us permission to watch you? Because it's for your own benefit. This is for an example. Billy, you can put the next one up there. This is the issues of permission. This is a few years old, and I think it was 2018. Symantec, which is one of those that does internet security and stuff, they went through and took the top 100 apps in each of the app stores, whether you're Apple or you're Google, and they went through and said, how often do they ask you for information? Well, sometimes they ask you for your phone number, and you can see the breakout there. They always ask you for an email address. How many people under the age of 15 even know what an email address is? Like you have one, but you know what it is? Duncan, you know it, and you use it? Good man. The world is leaving email behind. Your username, address, like those are the things that you go, sure, I'll share that. The next one gets a little more risky. Here's the ones where it says, can we track your location? Almost half, and if we really looked close, I think some of these Apple ones would actually be a bit further over. But Steve Jobs is still living somewhere in a bunker, cryogenically frozen, manipulating all the data, if you're wondering. Sorry, that's another conspiracy theory. Maybe we'll get to that in week 4. So track your location, access your camera. Can we record your audio? Cell phone log the people that you call, the text messages that you send. And now when you look at that, you go, yeah, they have to ask you that stuff. I wouldn't let them do that. Billy, go to the next one. This right here is when you swipe to the left on Instagram. Does anybody have Instagram? Some of you older generations are like, I don't even know what he's talking about. That a girl, Marilyn. It says right there, hey, if you want to post a story, you need to give us access to your camera and your microphone so that you can start uploading photos and videos. Well, I have photos and videos in the actual library of photos and videos. Why do I have to take a photo and a video through your app? Well, they don't care about that. They care about you giving them permission. Say it's okay that we access your camera. Say that it's okay that we access your information. Say that it's okay. And now most of you, if you've ever posted a story on this, or as you go through I didn't even bring up the Facebook permission because there's so much stuff in there. How many of you actually have those accounts? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Yeah, you better not have that one. That one's naughty. Now raise your hand if you took a picture of the thing and the QR code and let us know that you were here this morning. Not as many. You're willing to give your information away to a huge data server that collects everything. Everything. But you won't simply say to Lisa, hey, we were here. Just let that sink in a second. Some things you're okay with and some things you're not. Some things you're okay with because in order to participate, you have to. Now, here's the reality. You could be just fine. Throw this thing away. They still make phones that just sit in your house. You can plug them in if you really want to. We have them here at the church. I don't even know how to use them, actually. There's so many buttons on that thing, and there's an intercom thing, and we don't know how it actually works. I'm pretty sure that if you call me at the church, that the voicemail is still Steve's. I can't say for sure unless Lisa changed it. I don't know how to change it. I don't usually admit that I don't know how to do things, but that's something I don't know how to do. All that to say is we let this dictate the things in our lives. We allow it in. And so you wonder, well, why are people scared? Why are people fearful of the government spying on them? Why are they fearful of identity theft? Has anybody had their identity stolen? What did they do? Dave? Dude, come on! For all that don't know, I'm pretty sure he's an IT wizard and works for a very large corporation that does... It was the government. Big... It what? Oh, student loan. So as we look at some of these things, and the question is okay, Pastor Ken, how do you take identity theft and me allowing the government, Zuckerberg, whatever Chinese company that owns whatever, to track me? Like when I give them permission, most of you look at it. I think the only person in here that probably doesn't, where's Daryl? Daryl's one that actually reads those permissions and goes, yeah, I'm not doing that. Most of you don't. Most of you just go, allow, yeah, let me get to using this thing. And you don't know what you just gave away. Now you should ask the question, Ken, how are you going to wrap this into a sermon? I don't know. Well, we're going to pray, and then we're going to read a little scripture, and hopefully it works out. Spirit, I ask that you would come, that you would clear the cobwebs and the busyness and maybe even the anxiety that just got stirred. And I pray we would hear your voice. I pray that through an ancient story we would hear you speak, and I pray that you would bring us comfort. I pray that you would bring us relief from angst. I pray that our fears would be diminished and your love would take root. In your powerful name, Jesus, amen. Oh my goodness. I know, you only played 2 songs. It's not your fault, it's my fault. I don't know what we're going to do when we go to 2 services. We're going to run over a lot. Okay, I'll cut a little bit of a story and we'll just jump right in. We are going to go to the Book of Esther. Has anybody studied the Book of Esther? A few of you? It's a great book. It's a bit odd, but if you, literally it's one where I have had Max McLean, he reads it to me every morning like 4 or 5 times as I work out so that I can hear the story. It's a story. Like you can totally hear somebody sitting down and saying, now in the days of, and it totally unfolds. So if you get a chance, listen to it. We're going to spend a couple of weeks there. So for those of you small group leaders that are looking for a little direction, this week, next week, maybe the week after, we will be in the Book of Esther. I'm going to start at Esther 1:1 just to give us a little background here. The following events happened in the days of Ahasuerus. Now, some of you, if you have an NIV translation or something else, they will actually change that to Xerxes, 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 to give you the Greek form. That's from the Septuagint and not from the Hebrew. The Hebrew is them transliterating when they take Hebrew characters from the Persian word. So, from King Ahasuerus. I am referring to that Ahasuerus who ruled over 127 provinces, extending all the way from India to Ethiopia. In those days, as King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel. And now I'm jumping a little bit here, and we're going to chapter 2, verse 5. Now there happened to be a Jewish man in Susa, in the citadel, whose name was Mordecai. He was the son of Jair, the son of Shammai, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite. Does anybody know whose family line he's from? He's from the line of Benjamin, but there's a very important person in that family line that is also a son of Kish. Do you remember Kish? You say it again? Yes, the first king of Israel, King Saul. You will see this part come up again next week. Just a little spoiler alert as we look into terrorism. Who had been taken into exile from Jerusalem with the captives who had been carried off with Jehoiakim, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken into exile. Now that happened in the 580s BC. So Assyrians come in the late 700s, 720-something, take away the northern people. By 580-something, I think it was 87, I knew I should have remembered those dates. Then the Babylonians come in. Now we are with the Persians and the Medes. Verse 7. Now he was acting as the guardian of Hadassah. I tried to get Carrie to let us name Zenny Hadassah. She's like, nope. I didn't try too hard, but it was one of those. That is Esther. So here you have their Persian name, Esther. Hadassah is her Hebrew name, and it means myrtle. And an interesting side note is when you look through some of the historical markers, the annals of the kings of Persia, there's actually a queen that doesn't have these names, but is always surrounded by myrtle leaves when they show her in pictures. It's one of those brain benders where you go, I don't know that stuff really happened. Just wait, we'll get to it. The daughter of his uncle, that is Mordecai's, for neither her father nor her mother was alive, so she is orphaned. Esther is alone and lives, I'll do the math for you if you can't trace it, with her cousin. Mordecai is her cousin. And so this is cousins bunking up in the city of Susa, living together to try to find their way. There's some commentaries that say that this is kind of like a Ruth and Boaz kinsman redeemer, that he took her as one of his wives, is some of the historical markers. Not in the matrimony sense, but in the I will take care of you, that I will be there for you because your family is gone. This young woman was very attractive and had a beautiful figure. So that means not only did she look nice, but she looked nice. Like, rarely does Hebrew ever just kind of come through and say, she was pretty, really pretty, really pretty. When her father and mother had died, Mordecai had raised her as if she were his own daughter. So we know that Mordecai is probably a bit older, but we don't know how old. And we know that Esther is old enough to have a husband, but does not have one yet. Within a lot of the translations, you will have them as young women or virgins or basically not married yet. And the backstory here is King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, had a wife in the beginning and asked her to do some things that maybe she wasn't comfortable with that may come up later on in a different sermon or may not. You can ask your small group leader what it was that they asked to do. It involved crowns and coming to a party, and basically the king partied a lot. But this is the king that took control of everything from India, now think India, where it is now, all the way to Ethiopia, and then up towards Greece. Anybody seen the movie The 300 or heard about the 300 Thermopylae? This is Xerxes. Let me just say, this ain't Xerxes at all. You just banish that stupid image right out of your head, even though I just gave it to you. It's nothing like that. This right here is from the stone walls in Iran. Now, what this probably is the person seated is probably Darius. This would be Xerxes' father. And you can see something that'll be interesting as we move forward is he holds the golden scepter. You can't approach the king without him extending the scepter to you. That was his permission slip. And then behind him would be Xerxes, the crown prince waiting, and the rest are the kings. That's why in Persia you're not labeled a vassal or a chieftain. You're labeled a king because he wanted you to have that honor. But he, Xerxes, Darius, was king of kings, which you can see eventually trickle its way into the Hebrew scriptures and Jesus' title. So do I have another one in there, Bill? Okay, good. I couldn't remember. Oh, I do. So here's the general thing where you can see. All of the yellow is where they have. Susa is in modern-day Iran, if you're wondering. So Iran is where Susa is. The Assyrians were further up to the north, and the Babylonians were just a little bit to the west. Esther 2, verse 8 through 9. It so happened that when the king's edict and this law became known, I'll pause here. The edict was, he told Vashti, his first wife, you don't get to be my wife anymore, and I'm going to look for another one. And so then the advisors for the king said, you know what we should do? We should have like a beauty pageant. Not exactly in the Hebrew, but that's kind of my Message version. That's the Eugene Peterson version. We should have a beauty pageant with all of the beautiful young ladies, and they can come and try to be queen. So here's what happens. The king's edict and his law became known, and many young women were taken to Susa in the citadel to be placed under the authority of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the royal palace to be under the authority of Haggai, who was overseeing the women. This young woman pleased him, as in Esther, and she found favor with him, and he quickly provided her with cosmetics and her rations. He also provided her with the 7 specially chosen young women who were to be with her from the palace. He then transferred her and her young women to the best quarters in the harem. Now, let's just pause to say, Esther doesn't have it so rough. Yes, she was taken into the beauty pageant. Now, in these days, you didn't get to just like choose to be a part of it. It was people would walk through and go, you're in, you're in, you're in, you're in, let's go. And she immediately, something about her marks on the people around her. And she's found with favor. And she's given extra portions. She's given servants to help her. Verse 12. Now, at the end of the 12 months that were required for the women, when the turn of each young woman arrived to go see King Ahasuerus, For in this way, they had to fulfill their time of cosmetic treatment. And the Hebrew means rubbing and scraping, and think more like when you go to the spa and you go, oh, that didn't feel very good, but it's going to make my skin so nice. This is exfoliating. Most of you in here, like, especially you old guys, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. The treatment was 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with perfume and various ointments used by women. Now, here let's just reconfirm. Hadassah, Esther, is living in the palace, in the women's quarters, in her own special place, with her own servants, and she goes to the spa every day for a year. Doesn't sound super bad, does it? I mean, is she there and really wants to be there? Maybe not. But her accommodations aren't like a work camp. They aren't like being taken off into exile to actually do something for someone else. I'm not trying to equate that this is a good thing, but I'm saying things aren't quite as bad as we would go, oh, she was taken and she had basically everything she ever wanted. I skipped over verse 10. I'll hit that a second. Now Esther had not disclosed her people or her lineage, for Mordecai had instructed her not to do so. And day after day, Mordecai used to walk back and forth in front of the court of the harem in order to learn how Esther was doing and what might happen to her. So she's living in the palace in a bit of luxury, though still a captive. And her cousin continues to walk back and forth every single day to check on her because he still cares. He is the reminder. Now, the thing that you should wonder is, how does this all fit in? And I think for us, if we struggle with having our identity taken, or the thought of somebody taking your identity, or that somebody's watching you, or maybe Big Brother is spying on you, or the apps that you use, or if you have one of those Alexa things in your house, I mean, it's bad. Well, why does that matter? Why are there so many people in the United States fearful of that? Now, most of us in here probably don't mark this as one of our top fears, but it's in there a little bit. You get a little uneasy when you think of people listening to the things that you say all the time. And I think the struggle is a reality check of, who are you really? Are you the person that you portray when you're here on Sunday and all the kids sit nice and everything is good? You didn't spill coffee on your husband's back when you rode in on a motorcycle. You didn't yell at your kids to get in the car when they wouldn't get in the car and you were trying to get here. You didn't have that moment where you were a little bit hangry because you didn't get the breakfast that you wanted. Or maybe when you look through your pictures on Facebook or Instagram or any of those other apps that you give your authority away to, that's really your life. And people that really know you would go, oh, that's totally them. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes I think the reality is the reason we don't want people listening in on us, the reason we don't want people tracking us, the reason we don't want people kind of being there like Big Brother is because we don't want people to really know who we really are. I mean, if you really get at the source, now many of us may do pretty well in that. CP and I were talking the other day. If you want to see my browser history, take a look. If you want to watch me go to the bathroom, I don't care. That's on you, not me. If you want to, all of those things, that doesn't matter to me. But how many in our society struggle with putting on a front to the world to say everything is okay when deep down inside it's not? When there's a bit of a farce, there's a bit of a white picket fence in the yard that's always nice, even though there's water in the basement and mold growing on the walls. If we really poke at that hard enough, that is the struggle of the Midwest. That we don't outright say things to people, but we live in this place of kind of awkward shame where everything is good. Don't point anything else bad in my life because then I'll point it out in yours. We just want everything to be just so. And we can see that happen with Esther. She is Hadassah from the tribe of Benjamin. But she's now in the palace, and her name is Esther. And she gets beauty treatments. She has servants. And eventually what happens is, we'll talk about this a little more next week, a plot to root out all the Jews throughout Persia and exterminate them. But nobody knows that she's a Jew. She's Esther. She's not Hadassah. And she has that moment. There's a back and forth that we won't go through because time won't let us, between her and Mordecai, where he says, you have to do something. This is that if you've been around the church for a while or you scroll through the memes from churchy things, for such a time as this, is right in there. He says, you have to claim who you are and do something about it and not just live as Esther. Esther 4, verse 15. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Notice she's now queen, and she doesn't just walk around and get to talk to people at the fence. They're going back and forth between a messenger. Go and assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa, and fast on my behalf. Do not eat and do not drink for 3 days or 3 nights. My female attendants and I will also fast in the same way. And afterward, I will go to the king, even though it violates the law. For if I perish, I perish. Here's the clincher. When you truly embrace who you are, the person that God desires you to be, just like through baptism we say, we're there, that is what the people of God say. She doesn't have to go back into the palace and go, I guess I'll think about it for a while. She did that on her own. Now she comes to the community, the family, and says, you pray and fast for me, and I'll do the same thing, and God will lead us through. The struggle with the thought of people watching, listening, is that you think you're alone in that. But in the people of God, you're never alone. It's never you versus some big brother, versus some sort of thing that's lurking. It's always, always us. That when we get in our own heads, when we let the anxiety stir, that's when we start to have those anxious thoughts. That's when we have those moments where fear starts to set in. That's when Esther went back and forth with Mordecai through these letters saying, I don't really know, I'm not sure I can do it. If I go to the king, then he could, we talked about the scepter. She finally says, you're right. If I claim who I really am, deep down inside. I love the part in the liturgy. Though you don't know it, little one, it's for you that Christ came. It's for you that Christ died, and it's for you that Christ rose again so that you can have this family. That is the root. We live in a fearful society that page after page, click after click, swipe after swipe, everything you're bombarded with is fear-driven. They want you to be scared because scared people always come back for more information. Always. What I'm here to tell you this morning is sometimes, more than this in your life, you need these people. This will continue to tell you to be scared. And the people to your left and your right are the ones that say, we're in this together. And if you don't believe me, you all stood up just about 33 minutes ago and said that you are together. So when you have those anxious moments where you think a little uneasy, when you wonder who's watching, when you wonder what's tracking your data, just remember it doesn't matter. You gave them permission. Not that big a deal. If you're living as the people of God, accountable to the people right beside you, you're not going to go anywhere that's sketchy. You're not going to go anywhere that you should be worried about. You're not going to be in places that you don't know unless you have no idea how the internet works, and sometimes that does happen. I'll give that caveat for a few of you in here. But the point is your identity is not just an I. It's not just you and Jesus trying to make it through. It's us. It's we. It's the church gathered together to say, when you have something big, I'm there for you. When I have something big, you'll be there for me. We just need to remember that a little bit. Okay, Craig, you better come up. I better pray. We're really going to have to adjust as we get to 2 services. I'm just going to pray. Spirit, I ask that through the midst of a lot of things that we talked about, a lot of pictures and stories, a little bit of angst, I pray that you would continue to remind us. Remind us who we are. Remind us where our identity lies. Remind us that through it all, you're with us. No height, no depth. Nothing can separate us from your love. And I pray that that perfect love would drive out the fear within our lives. Let us lean on the brothers and sisters to our right, to our left, the ones watching online, that we are all in this together. And when angst and fear creeps in, you would remind us continually. Jesus, in your name, amen. Would y'all stand and sing with us before we go outside and have ice cream bars?